Hi and welcome to Practice Excellence Live 2017. I'm John Stockdyke, the editor of Accounting Web, and this session is going to be all about MTD, an old favourite. It's going to be brought to you in association with Thomson Reuters and this expert panel of tax people, starting with Rebecca Cave, who's the tax writer for Accounting Web. Mark Perdue is the tax product manager of Thomson Reuters and this year's nominee for Software Excellence Champion, so we'll find out about that on Thursday. And finally, Gary Jacobs, who's the director of Easy Tax. Gary's the first UK practitioner to join HMRC's pilot programme for MTD, so we're really going to get the frontline view from Gary. MTD has been this roller coaster over the past year. Is it going to go ahead? Who's it's going to affect? We've had elections, Brexit, everything's chopped and changed the whole programme. So it has altered, and the starting date has gone back to April 2019 for VAT registered businesses. That's a little bit more time to prepare, but I think there's a worry at the moment that everyone's just sat back and taken a breather and realised, think we don't have to worry now. The message that we'll be putting out is use all the time you can to prepare for this, because it's a huge undertaking. And as I say, Rebecca, Mark and Gary are here to help us look at some of the hows. Just before we get into the conversation, if you experience any trouble viewing it or you have to leave the webcast, don't worry. We're going to put a recorded version out on YouTube so you can come back to it any time and look over it again. Rebecca's prepared a download that will compile all the technical information that we talk about, so you can come back to that, download it and read it. And finally, I've got an iPad here. If you look at the Cover It Live box on the screen where you're watching the video, you can type in any questions you want for the panel. Once we've been through the main programme, which will be about 30 minutes, we'll then have a Q&A session, so you can put your own questions to the panel and we can kick some of the ideas around. That's basically it. There's a lot to get through. Rebecca, can you maybe just bring us up to date? We have seen some draft legislation now. What are the key takeaways for practitioners?
Well, absolutely, John. We had draft legislation before the election, and then it disappeared out of the finance bill. So we've had a sort of hokey-cokey of the legislation. It was in, it was out, now it's back in again. We have a finance bill going through Parliament at the moment with the bare bones of legislation for MTD, but we also, on top of that, we have some draft regulations for MTD, which is interesting. We have the draft regulations setting out what digital record keeping means, and also how the regulations will have to change existing regulations to make MTD work. But what we don't have, and what is essential really at the moment, is regulations for VAT. Because VAT is going to be the first off the blocks. As you said, VAT registered businesses are going to have to start complying from the 1st of April 2019. But we don't have any regulations. We have an overview document from HMRC, which is really not good enough. However, all of you out there, please have a look at the draft regulations, and there's a link in the download document, and give HMRC your views, because they are open for consultation until the 10th of November.
So Mark, from a software perspective, what do you see as the challenges ahead for practitioners? What can you tell from what the legislation says so far that they need to be thinking about?
So from a software perspective and a technical perspective, it's almost business as usual. It's just additional data types we're talking about around what the software needs to send. That said, we don't have the details behind what these 9 figures are and what the voluntary disclosures more than that is. I think the biggest challenge for software is trying to understand why today people aren't using software to submit their VAT returns. Nearly 90% go straight onto the gateway and they type the values in. Under MTD, the idea is that that process will be replaced with APIs, which means the software needs to support whatever those scenarios are, which isn't supported today. So I think that's the main challenge for software.
So Gary, out at your firm, does that picture of actually that many of your clients not even being in VAT filing software circles yet. Does that hold for you?
Yeah, I think it holds for every practitioner, but the truth of the matter is, for small practitioners like myself, we're less interested in the politics and more interested in the practical, and the practical was about putting the process in place. Now, when we started the pilot was about income tax, although we've moved around a bit to bring VAT forward. It's all coming through. The income tax is going to come, the VAT is going to come, we have our set dates. But actually our job as the practitioner is to put our process in place, to put the education of our clients in place. And so, as I say, like most practices, I'm less interested in the politics and the change around. I'm more interested in getting the process so that we understand it, my internal training, the external training. I think with the VAT, that there is a certain element where there was a presumption that because it's a quarterly return, it would be easier to overlay, and maybe the HMRC didn't realise, where the income tax is concerned, the breadth of, for most practitioners, from high-end software users to a man with a shoebox walking in the door, it's a very big ask to find the process and to bring people, even digitise our own clients to bring it into that. So I think it's really about us concentrating. We essentially haven't changed the systems that we're putting in place, regardless of how the legislation has changed, because that's more important than anything else for the practitioner, is to be ready.
Yeah. So Mark, Gary's got a little bit of a complex bag of situations to deal with his client space. What does HMRC need to put in place for their MTD VAT systems to work? I mean, there isn't an infrastructure there yet, is there?
Well, a lot of the work that's taken place for income tax is still going to be used for VAT. So the concept of authorising software, authorising agents, the general communication channels. We still don't, as a software developer, we still don't know what the APIs, which is the little thing that allows our software to talk to HMRC, we don't know what that's going to look like for VAT in these 9 boxes. I think a bigger challenge for HMRC is a lot of unrepresented businesses do their own VAT returns. They need to get better at communicating that in 15, 16 months' time, this new process is coming in, and they can't do what they do today. So I think that's going to be their biggest challenge.
Okay, Rebecca, and which of these businesses are, who was going to be the first wave of MTD pioneers? Has sort of changed a few times over the year of the plans. Who actually is in the frame now?
Well, now it's going to be all VAT registered businesses with turnover over the compulsory VAT registration threshold, which is currently £85,000. Those businesses, which will be everything from a one-man company to the largest multinational corporates, are all supposed to come into the MTD for VAT regime from the 1st of April 2019. So that is a vast population. However, out of that, we can eliminate some people. Those businesses which have registered for VAT on a voluntary basis, because their turnover is not up to the 85,000 threshold, they won't have to come into MTD for VAT. They can come in voluntarily if they want to, but they don't have to. Also, businesses who have turnover over £85,000 but are not VAT registered because their sales are exempt from VAT, such as registered landlords of residential property, medical practitioners, dentists, most of their income will be exempt from VAT, so they don't tend to be VAT registered. Or if they are, they're registered on a voluntary basis. They won't have to come into the MTD regime for VAT. Also, traders from overseas who have to be registered in the UK, even if they have a very small amount of turnover in the UK, they have to be registered for VAT in the UK. But that they won't have to come in because unless their turnover is also over £85,000. So they've cut off around the edges certain numbers, but it still leaves a huge population of businesses which are very, very varied to come into the regime.
Okay, Gary, you talked about the complexities of your client base, and even just who are the affected businesses. We've heard is there's quite a few variants. What are the practical challenges you you're looking at to just actually begin to get them organised and in.
Well, I think a big deal is the fact that because of the change, there's a massive amount of micro businesses that practitioners should have been preparing for that are now no longer involved or have been pushed back for a year. I think that one of the greatest challenges actually is going to be complex businesses at the top end. If I'm honest, I think that the HMRC have looked at the fact that VAT, and this is only my guess, has looked at the fact that VAT is a quarterly submission and made a presumption that, let's face it, MTD is about the movement of information from one place to another in a confidential manner. So the fact that there is already a quarterly submission has meant that maybe the HMRC was looking at it as an easier win. And I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case because there is a push into looking for commercial software to pick up the slack. Strangely enough, commercial software tends to be stronger in straightforward accounts for incorporated and the tax side. So, and there are, I mean, Mark can tell us better than that, but I don't think the software houses were so well set up. Amazing the amount of accountants that still do VAT direct through the HMRC system. So I can understand the view of why they've done it. There is a familiarity to the process, but it's maybe not the win that they would hope that there would be.
But again, Mark, I mean, Thomson Reuters doesn't actually do the bookkeeping software that traditionally generates the VAT return information. So are you going to add some component to handle that in the program, or are there other ways around it?
So putting MTD to one side, the Digita side of the Thomson Reuters business, we've never really been asked for VAT software because it's easy to type numbers in and do it in Excel. We are now starting to get interest in finding out what our plans are for VAT. Thomson Reuters does have a VAT product aimed at that large corporate, but in the Digita space for professionals, today we don't have a product. And you're quite right, it's because traditionally it's your bookkeeping transactions is where the data is for VAT. So we're looking at that at the moment to see what gap there is that we need to fill for our software users.
Is that a gap you think the brave spreadsheet that we all fought to keep within the system, do you think the spreadsheet may be a viable way to plug that gap in the short term?
To an extent, yes. I know in discussions I've had with HMRC, because of the fact nearly 90% of the traffic goes straight into the gateway by people typing in the numbers, they appreciate that if software can't do the task across all business types today, there needs to be something between that and the submission. And they've said to me that a spreadsheet style, import, export, etc., is something that they're happy to discuss. So I think Excel's going to play a big role under VAT.
And remember, until the announcement came out, a lot of practitioners, I mean, our greatest worry was looking at data capture. And once again, accepting the fact that there are still clients, as I referred to before, that bring a shoebox in with the, how do you? It was about how do you digitise this section of the business population. And actually how many people are using traditional software. And I mean, the idea that the spreadsheet was not to become a part of that process was madness because there's still significant people. And I think we have to be very careful. It has to be inclusive with how we do this. But we were looking at how to capture data and take it on board. It's changed the nature because people that are doing their VAT returns have got to do the initial data capture. Still leaves us with a little problem coming up for the year after is how we deal with that. But in terms, I mean, the pilot at the moment, in terms of the exchange of information, that's all going very solidly, and it's about process with the HMRC. But no one's looking at how the early work's done.
I think we should just sort of clarify for viewers that the essence of MTD is that the software takes the data from the point that the person enters the transaction and pumps it seamlessly through the API to HMRC systems. There's supposed to be no human interaction. Yeah. That's the basis of the MTD theory. Now with VAT, we know that that is broken in 88% of cases because people take their VAT information from lots of different spreadsheets, lots of different companies. If you've got a VAT group, it gets very complicated because you've got different accounting systems for every member of the VAT group often. They all have to be combined together to do one VAT return for the whole VAT group. Now, I don't think HMRC have really thought about this, and they haven't thought about all the different VAT schemes, which means the data that goes on the VAT return is actually different to what's coming out for accounts purposes. So if you've got a VAT scheme such as the flat rate scheme, TOMS for tour operators, maybe the capital goods scheme does. There are loads and loads of different VAT schemes. The global margin scheme, all those things need fiddling about with the figures before they go into the VAT return and between the accounting system.
And that's even before we look at the synchronising of dates.
Yes.
I mean, it's a massive issue in terms of, I think that it's very interesting because the idea behind MTD, the way it was sold to agents, is the fact that it will simplify the tax system. Well, if your job is to gather information from many different sources in order to input it, that's actually increasing our workload in the short term. I think that,
Can I just get,
go on.
probably can you clarify that idea about the synchronising of dates? I mean, your idea, Gary, was where you said, the principle you think going on at HMRC is the company's already filing quarterly for VAT. That's going to be an easier win than some of the other things. But are there, so it's, does the legislation clarify
Should
yet?
I take up that one?
Yeah,
Yes.
we were talking about this.
Yes, the legislation, currently everybody knows the VAT return is due 1 month and 1 week after the end of the quarter. Now, when MTD was first suggested, they wanted the VAT return or the VAT type of MTD report to be done 1 month after the end of the quarter, so you would lose a week. Well, HMRC have rode back on that and said no, the VAT data will be submitted 1 month and a week after the end of the quarter. I think they actually say 5 days, 1 month and 5 days after the end of the quarter it relates to. But for income tax, it's going to be exactly 1 month after the end of the quarter. So we've already got a week difference in the deadlines between income tax and VAT. Now, there's going to be a provision in the legislation to allow people to input more information. They're calling it supplementary information for VAT. As the regulations or the overview of the regulations stand at the moment, all they want for the VAT report is the 9 boxes which are currently on the VAT return, i.e. 9 figures. And businesses won't have to submit any more than those 9 figures. However, they will be allowed to submit this supplementary information, which will be sort of background calculations of how those 9 figures were arrived at and maybe more detailed transactions. But all that stuff will be voluntary. Now, they will be able to submit that on a voluntary basis, but it won't be a compulsory submission.
And we've got a question here from Paul Tabron, pretty much on this. I mean, I think he must have reacted to what you were saying about the VAT schemes. Are you aware of any software tools that handle all the different schemes that maybe can boil the numbers down to the 9 that will be needed yet?
No. There we are.
Sorry.
There's a straightforward answer.
Sorry,
But you see, Rebecca quite rightly said that the consultative. Remember, we just changed horses, haven't we? The legislation's changed, and we've gone from so we're all looking at the implications with the VAT. I think that there is still more consultating. There we are. There's more consulting to be done.
Yes, we were promised some more consultation on MTD for complex businesses and for corporates, but that hasn't appeared. I haven't even heard when it is going to appear. But what we really need is a scoping paper for MTD for VAT. And it looks like HMRC are charging ahead down the VAT road with actually not knowing where they're going.
Okay, well, thank you, Rebecca. I mean, well, I'm sure that will get some answers from our members. In fact, actually, I think Ram just said that. It seems that those who are already using software to submit VAT online are already working on VAT digitisation. That's, I think, a all quit from them. We talked about this idea of there is the policy, the regulatory vacuum. The technical ingredients, I think, are in place, but I started off this session saying, you've got to, if you don't prepare now, you really will be taken by surprise and inconvenienced come April. What are you doing, Gary? How much do your clients currently know about MTD, and what if they don't know anything about it? How are you dealing with it?
Once again, rather than talk about the from a practitioner's point of view about the legislation and the politics, we're talking about the process. So, and you know what? It's really very straightforward. Without even discussing MTD, we've been looking very hard at the process that we have. And let's talk about the micro businesses first of all. Some of them won't even come into this current deadline. But as a practice, you should seek to take your guys with the shoeboxes and teach them a greater progress, even if it's paper process. We're then looking to take our people that have paper process and bring them to spreadsheet. We're then taking our spreadsheet clients and taking them to software and digital software. So it's about information. We have a newsletter going out. We're talking to clients individually. The most important thing is that please don't think I'm a smaller practice down in the wilds of Essex. We're not bringing any high-tech views. What we're doing is internal education to our staff, making sure that when you have contact with the clients, they're aware of it. And also we have a regular newsletter that goes out. And we're starting to turn around to clients individually at regular annual 6-monthly meetings and saying, well, you're doing this, you should be doing this. There's a lot of people are starting to get bombarded with the concept of MTD without really knowing what it is, and there's an awful lot of people that are saying, well, it's nothing to do with me. I think that a lot of my fellow practitioners have actually said to me, well, I think they're waiting for the I's to be dotted and the T's to be crossed. You can't wait for that, because the whole thing, I believe the HMRC will adopt a consultative process. I think we will get there. I think that there is a slight difficulty because of the policy makers leading through to the practicality. But we should be talking to our clients about the process and how to make it easier for us to receive the information now. There is going to be, we are going to have to adopt better technology. We're going to have to look at data capture. My small plumber, I want him to be photographing his receipts and uploading that to a document that will overlay it onto a spreadsheet. The technology is out there. I mean, we've been working with Thomson Reuters to put these things together, but it's out there to be used. It really, I've spoken to some practitioner who says, oh, this is the end of how I'm going to trade it. I don't think it is. We've referred before about self-assessment coming in all those years ago, and it would substantially change. What it did was bring people closer to their agent, to their accountant. I think this can do the same. It's just about educating now. Don't wait for... accountants, we are pretty bad at this. We like to read the black and white. Mm-hmm. Don't wait for the minutiae of the wording to come through. Start pushing the process now.
And with those clients at the different levels of the shoeboxes and their spreadsheets, have you formalised how you address and educate them at the different levels, or is it just purely one-on-one at the moment?
No, it's informal. As I say, for me, the most important thing is for my staff to be aware of how it's going. And also, I don't think we should be scaring the clients yet. It's a wonderful opportunity to work with our clients and to bring it forward. We can't formalise. I think when on certain of the more basic data capture, we can formalise a relationship with them and, as I say, move each one onto a closer stage. With our larger clients and more complex clients, we're not in a position to dictate at the moment, but they're aware, and most of them have got fairly strong internal systems anyway. So, in effect, the technology behind making MTD work is there. It's the detail that we're coming. So, I just think that if every accountant doesn't put it in the in tray, that's, just start to talk about it and start to think, because there's information moving between a client and accountant all the time. You've just got to stop the people dropping off the bags. And it's amazing, even on some of the larger companies, the exchange of information is still 20th century, is it?
Mark, Gary's out there kind of with the lead of the profession pretty much on this issue overall. What do you see happening in the wider sort of customer base of Thomson Reuters? You know, how prepared do you think the profession is?
So at the point when income tax reporting was deferred, we did a survey of our users, and just over 800 accountants responded. And one of the questions was, are you doing anything about MTD? Nearly half said yes, 48% said yep, I'm doing something about MTD. 45% it was on their to-do list, which, okay, is not ideal, but at least it's on their radar. There was still 7%, and it's a very small percentage, but in the scheme of things, it's equally just a large percentage of people who have no plans to engage with MTD. So that was quite a worrying statistic. But I think generally when I speak to our software users, they're certainly aware of it, because I won't ever shut up about it. So they're aware of it, they know it's coming, and they're starting slowly to engage with it. And all I ever say to them is it's better to engage with your clients, even if it's to say it's coming. I don't know how it's exactly going to impact you, but it's coming, rather than not engaging at all. So I think that message is getting through.
But also, I mean, there is, and we've all pretty much seen it already, the risk of you know, accountants are very habituated to kind of, if there's a deadline coming, you might as well wait till just before it.
Yeah.
And we've already seen that okay, MTD, I can push that back to the queue. Oh, there's this GDPR, data protection thing coming in. Suddenly everyone's actually brought that forward, they're looking at it, and in fact, thanks to Thomson Reuters, we're doing a companion webinar about this as part of Practice Excellence Live. But what can the profession do, or how do we stop the profession from just putting it out of sight, out of mind for too long?
I think to answer that, I think practitioners need to look at MTD as really an opportunity to talk to their clients about what the clients are looking for in the future. Some clients, when you talk to them about computerising their business, will go, oh no, I'm too old for this, I need to retire. Well, that's an opportunity, because there needs to be planning about retirement and about succession of the business. Others will be, yes, I want to computerise, but where do I get the funds from? Where do I get the skills from? You know, there'll be lots of worries within the clients, and the accountant can help their clients with that. They can help them, you know, sort of draw up plans to get more funding if they need that to computerise. They can draw up plans as to how to structure their business to get more skilled people within it to help them deal with it. But all those things are long-term things. You know, getting people on board takes a long time. Getting new software and hardware also not so long, but it's still a considerable amount of planning to be done. And accountants can help with all those peripheral things before you're even space one on MTD, really.
Okay, I mean, we're getting quite close. I think I might turn over to we're going to be opening the session up to the audience questions. So just before we go for the free-for-all section, because I mean it is still a huge subject, there's so much to cover, but what do you know out of the session before it goes crazy and we really chase all the different hairs and different interests, what's the one idea, the one practical thing you think our viewers should take away? And I'll start with you, Mark.
I still hear quite frequently, it's not going to happen, or it's going to happen, but it's over a year away, so I don't need to worry about it. Start engaging with it, because it is definitely going to happen. You know, the framework is all there. It's not going to go away, so you need to start engaging with it.
Okay, I guess, Rebecca, what's your...
I think starting to look, as Gary was saying, starting to look at your clients' processes surrounding VAT. Do they do it themselves? How do they do it? What controls do they have on it? How can the accountant get involved in that? I mean, if you're not already checking your clients' VAT returns quarter on quarter, so little gentle hints as maybe, you know, a review now and again would be a good idea, just to start prepping whether the process is accurate enough.
Gary, what about you?
Well, I have my little phrase that we're looking at, because to a certain extent the accountant is dead, long live the accountant. I think in the next 5 years the profession will not look the same, and in my own practice the ratio of administrative officer to technical to accountant is changing. Process is going to become more important than anything else. Our role as AI engines are making more and more decisions, and the review process is changing. And a lot of the process is being pushed out by the HMRC actually into the hands of the software houses. So I think the job of the professional is going to be a very different job. We'll still be advice based. So start looking at your practice now. And I think anything that you do in order to invest in the process of what you're doing and understand your clients better is good. Even without MTD, to seek to improve your clients in the way that you deal with them can't be a bad thing. So start now.
Okay, well, thanks. I mean, I'm going to have to pull you up there, Gary, because I sort of say, give me one practical step, one little step that you can take to, what so people go away from the session now. Yeah.
Do that newsletter, the one that you keep meaning to do, or the one that you send out to a company to do for you. Write it yourself, make it direct to your clients, and incorporate in your own review system when you see your clients to talk to them about not the higher concept of MTD, but how you receive the information from them. So when you have your check sheet that you sit down, I hope that you do, that you sit down with your client, including that check sheet, how do I obtain the information from my client? That one step will start you in that consultative process with your client. There we are, there's your one step.
Thank you. Practical as well, because the floor is open. We're going to take questions on the iPad now, so hammer them in onto the little box on the site. There's a bit of a love fest going on here between you and Paul Tabron. He's been agreeing with everything he says.
That's my favourite of the day now.
But I guess one of the things he actually said was a little bit the point I made as the great vistas. But HMRC is, they went down, took us down the income tax route, and then they've changed targets, and that's upsetting Paul and John Jenkins. So. Again, Mark, you've experienced that pretty, at another level up, looking at and Rebecca with the legislation. So again, with how have you managed the moving targets through the whole policy development process?
So at the moment, a lot of the development we're still doing is still based on income tax because they are known things that we can interact with. We still don't have any detail about the VAT. I agree with something that Gary said earlier, which is I think there was a view perhaps in HMRC that they income tax was being unpopular. VAT, they looked at it and, to use a paraphrase, was it's only 9 boxes. How hard can it be? And that became their renewed focus. So, I think they thought maybe it was going to be more popular and easy to implement the VAT rather than income tax. From a software perspective, as I say, we're still implementing all of that income tax functionality because it is going to come in. Whether it comes in as MTD and is quarterly or whether it comes in by some other guise, it's still going to be a digital exchange of information between software and HMRC. So that's our focus at the moment until we start getting the actual detail of VAT coming through.
I mean, I would say that HMRC don't know what they've bitten off really with the VAT because it covers every single VAT registered business up to the most complicated, such as, tiered partnerships involving companies as partners, partnerships involving other partnerships as partners, tiered partnerships that you often get with legal firms and fund manager firms, partnerships within them, nested or tiered. Incredibly complicated, all running their own different accounting systems, all have to be gathered together if they're in a VAT group. Partnerships aren't necessarily in VAT groups, but they have to all do VAT returns. With money flowing between these different organisations all the time, and estimates of profits and transactions flowing all the time as well. I mean, it's just ridiculously complicated. One thing I didn't mention about the legislation and when people have to submit returns, those businesses which are on the annual accounting system for VAT currently only submit one VAT return a year, and they sort of do estimated payments of VAT through the year. That's going to continue with MTD for VAT. They will do one MTD return of their VAT information, which makes one ask, what's the point?
Anyone could answer that?
No.
Okay, I mean, we're sort of, we have been very VAT focused, and that is the next deadline. The political stance is, there will be no decision until 2020 on any other facet of MTD.
In fact, the political stance is we will not go ahead until MTD for VAT is working well, which is what the Minister said. Now, what working well is, I don't think you can say that the system is working well after only a year, and they're not even going to have a year's testing because they haven't even written any legislation, as
No.
Mark was saying.
Yeah.
He doesn't know how to do any programming for MTD for VAT, he can't even start.
But Mark, what do you think the landscape looks like beyond that point? And I'll get your views, because we've had a question from the floor as well that
Okay.
you may anticipate, other uncertainties on the horizon, whether they might impact MTD. But let's look at it purely from your perspective. In the
So HMRC have said to me, let's April 2020, which is the earliest date, and they are viewing that, certainly as said to me from a policy perspective, as an actual goal, a target that they want to hit, and that's why they're putting such focus on the pilot. The pilot hasn't disappeared. The VAT isn't in the pilot yet, but they haven't sort of switched off the income tax pilot and thought we don't need to worry about that just yet. To prove to the Treasury that they can tick this box to say it's a success, they are putting a lot of effort into getting that pilot so that Gary can start submitting income tax details. Then from April 2019, VAT details come into the same process. So when we get towards April 2020, they've got, hopefully, from their perspective, the evidence they need to show if we switch this live, it will work, it won't fail. So the pilot is massive in their plan.
I think that's a point well made, and I would say, apart from a little gap with I think there was an election, wasn't there? If I remember rightly. Our pilot diary hasn't changed on the income tax, and I want to make it just a very quick point here as well, because I know what a lot of practitioners are thinking as they sit here and watch this, and it's all very well talking about practical aspects of doing it. As I sit here in the morning when I should be on chargeable time back in my office, the life of the small practitioner is busy. We don't have enough time as it stands, so it's one more thing, on top of the other legislation as well. It's hard enough to keep up with the demands of clients and the demands of other legislation. The idea is that the train of MTD is off and going, and okay, that we've moved VAT back and income tax, but it's still going to be there. So you've got to still, and I think that's the point. The pilot's still going, the diary on the pilot's still going. People should still be addressing it in whatever way, because we don't, time is precious enough for people like us without doing it, and I think that's.
Can you help us with a question that's come in from is it someone called S? I think are you doing anything to make sure that the bookkeeping tools you use, say if it's something like Free Agent or Xero, if you've got people onto the online stuff, are they talking to you yet about how they're going to make sure MTD for VAT is working out of their systems yet?
That's interesting. I haven't really held the. We've been speaking to quite a few of the people that hold the bookkeeping tools. Most of them have an MTD plan in place, and to be honest, most of their if you are using digitised bookkeeping software in any way, shape or form, it will fit. We know it will fit. It will be made to fit. We are not introducing any. MTD is not introducing any new process, whether or not we have the ubiquity across it, but yes, and we are pushing our clients to I think that's the biggest deal, is pushing clients that aren't using them to using them. Like every accountant, we have the one or two favourites we'd like them to use. They always have a very different idea from us. But every step you take to make your client more sophisticated in the way they get the information to you is a positive thing. I don't know any of the bookkeeping software. I don't really want to name names, but I don't think any of them are out of the game in any way, shape or form. Because
and again, they'll need a spec to comply with. They'll need an API and stuff to.
I think we need to keep away from thinking that the actual exchange of information is going to be ridiculously difficult. I think for complex companies it is, but that's complex to begin with. But all we're doing is, in terms of the time that we've spent mapping out the way the information's moved between ourselves and the revenue, it will, once the pilot is working, it will be able to overlay with all of these systems.
Mark, I've got a question here from Jenny, which revives an old favourite, and it is kind of relevant to the VAT. From April 1919, Jenny's pointed out that agents won't be able to file VAT on behalf of their clients anymore. I think that's an agent services relationships. Do we know if clients will be able to type in the numbers via their own logins, or will all VAT have to be submitted via software?
So part of MTD is this agent access or agent services. And we're going through, there's actually 2 or 3 pilots going on at the moment. And one of those is around agents being able to authorise clients and to get a view into the client's tax account information. So that is the stepping stone towards an agent being authorised to submit VAT data on behalf of a client. So that will still be what you're not supposed to be doing today, but some people still do, is to actually log into the gateway using your client's gateway ID and type numbers in. That HMRC have been quite plain, quite rightly, that has to stop. So VAT submissions will still be possible by an agent under MTD. Equally, I'm assuming that a bookkeeping product that's aimed at a client will enable them to have a button to do their own submission. So it's again, the same as today, the client can do it, the agent can do it. In the future, that element isn't going to change. It's the mechanism of how the data gets across to HMRC that's going to change. But the actual,
And remember that one of the things is MTD is it's going to a single gateway. So all of the companies that have 5, 10, 15, however many, one. So everything will.
Yeah.
We talked earlier a lot about, really, I guess we've identified at the moment the primary concern is education, just getting the message across to the clients. Michael Balls asked us, do we know if HMRC has any plans to get in on the act? It has actually, you've talked about pushing the sort of processing load onto the software developers, and they're doing a lot of the education probably amongst the profession, but what about within the how we're actually going to get the clients educated? And have we heard? Do we know if HMRC is anything doing directly yet? Have you?
We have been told that there will be a rollout of information. Okay.
Yes.
We haven't been told when.
I recall at the Synergy conference, which Thomson Reuters hosted back in March of this year, was it, Mark, that the spokeswoman from HMRC was asked this very question from the floor, and she said, yes, we're planning something, but couldn't tell us anything more. And that was March, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, so they're planning something, but they're not telling us what they're planning as far as publicity goes. But I think practitioners are well within their rights to start shouting about this, start shouting to your MPs about it, your representatives. Why isn't HMRC pulling their weight on the publicity of MTD? Because everybody has got to pull in the same direction on this. HMRC often criticise the tax profession for, sort of being negative about tax issues. Well, MTD people have got to be positive to push it forward, but HMRC have got to pull as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we've been this webcast, the one last year, Thomson Reuters accounting web, we have been trying to keep the momentum going on there, and HMRC have signalled, they are quite supportive of what we're doing, and we had Claire from HMRC here last year, so within the existing framework there is stuff going on.
But this is there is, in the right hands, there is positive commercial advantage for a practitioner to get involved in this. And it's a good question, but I hear this also, what are the HMRC? Well, you know what? Grab it, take it. It's an opportunity to, from a practitioner, from a commercial point of view, to get in there. And those accountants that don't do this will suffer in the long run.
However, I have heard from accountants that they try and put this message over to clients, and clients go, I don't believe you. I can't believe this. I can't believe the story that you're telling me about MTD. Unless HMRC actually say something in black and white from HMRC, I, as the client, am not going to believe that this is actually happening. So HMRC have to pull their weight on this as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure when we get to Practice Excellence Live next year, the same time, same channel, we'll be saying many of the same things, perhaps with a bit more data, and actually we will look forward to having HMRC along again. I think we'll probably be doing more with them. In the meantime, Accounting Web, right after this session, Gary and Mark are going to go off to, and possibly we're going to go off and record a podcast, part of our regular education program with Thomson Reuters. So we'll certainly be chewing over all the issues for the year to come. I just say, you know, it is time to round up. We've whizzed through 45 minutes, and you know, I think just because we do have working lives elsewhere, we'll let everyone go now. But do stay tuned to Practice Excellence Live. I'd like to thank Gary Jacobs from Easy Tax,
Thank you very much.
Mark Purdue from Thomson
Thank you.
Reuters, and Rebecca
Thank you.
Kay from Tax Writer Limited for your expert insights. That really was very valuable. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.